The miscalculation, the galactic assembly had existed for 12,000 cycles. Across 700 star systems, 43 species had found common ground under its banner. They traded, they negotiated, they prospered. The assembly's greatest achievement was peace, a fragile thing maintained through careful diplomacy and the understanding that no single species should ever become too powerful. Then humanity arrived. The humans came from a small blue world they called Earth, tucked away in an unremarkable spiral arm of the galaxy. They were young, barely 300 cycles into space travel. Their ships were crude but functional. Their technology was primitive but improving rapidly. Too rapidly, some said. The assembly watched them with growing concern. Humans expanded aggressively, claiming systems, establishing colonies, building infrastructure at a pace that made even the most ambitious species nervous. They were friendly enough, always willing to trade and talk, but there was something unsettling about them, something in their eyes that suggested depths the assembly couldn't quite measure. The Krillic Dominion was the first to raise concerns. Their representative, a tall creature with crystalline skin that refracted light in unpleasant ways, stood before the Assembly Council and spoke with urgency. The humans were dangerous, he claimed. They bred too quickly. They adapted too easily. They learned too fast. Left unchecked, they would dominate the galaxy within 1,000 cycles. The Vexari agreed. The Thernian Collective agreed. One by one, species that had never seen eye to eye found common ground in their fear of humanity. Even the peaceful Ilarians, a species that had never raised a weapon in anger, voted for containment. The resolution passed with overwhelming support. Humanity would be limited to 50 star systems. No more expansion. No more colonies beyond their designated zone. The Assembly would enforce this with economic sanctions first, then blockades if necessary, and finally military action if humans refused to comply. The humans asked for dialogue. They sent ambassadors to plead their case. They offered compromises, proposed alternative solutions, begged for more time to present their side. The Assembly refused. The decision was final. Humanity would be contained for the good of the galaxy. The humans withdrew their ambassadors. For 3 cycles, there was silence from human space. The Assembly interpreted this as acceptance or perhaps preparation for a futile resistance. They were wrong on both counts. The attack came without warning. Not from the Assembly, but on the Assembly's authority. A coalition fleet led by the Krillic, but including ships from 8 other species, jumped into the Meridian system. Colony Meridian was humanity's newest settlement, home to 2 million souls. The colony had been established just outside the proposed containment zone, a clear violation of the Assembly's resolution. The coalition delivered an ultimatum: evacuate within 6 hours or face forced removal. The colonists responded by asking for more time. They had families, children, infrastructure that couldn't simply be abandoned. They needed at least a week to organize a proper evacuation. The Krillic commander denied the request. 6 hours. Not a moment more. 5 hours and 57 minutes later, the bombardment began. Captain Sarah Chen was in her ship, the UHSV Steadfast, when the first reports came through. She was 3 systems away, escorting a medical transport. The distress signal from Meridian hit her communication array like a physical blow. Screaming, fire, death falling from the sky in streams of plasma and kinetic rounds. She didn't wait for orders. She jumped immediately, pushing her ship's drives beyond safe limits. The Steadfast burst into Meridian space, trailing superheated exhaust. What she saw would stay with her for the rest of her life. The colony was burning. Orbital platforms were nothing but debris. Evacuation ships, clearly marked with medical symbols, were being targeted and destroyed. On the surface, cities glowed with fire. The death toll was climbing by the second. Sarah Chen had served in the Human Defense Fleet for 20 years. She had seen combat, piracy, and disaster, but she had never seen this. This wasn't war. This was extermination. The coalition fleet detected her approach. A Krillic battlecruiser moved to intercept, weapons charging. Sarah's tactical officer looked at her with wide eyes, waiting for orders. They were 1 ship against 40. There was nothing they could do except die alongside the colonists. Sarah surprised everyone, including herself, by opening a communication channel. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Human Systems. I am not here to fight. I am here to witness." The Krillic commander appeared on her screen, his translator rendering his clicking language into flat, emotionless words. Witness then. Witness what happens to those who defy the assembly. I will, Sarah said quietly, and I will make sure everyone knows exactly what you did here today. The Krillic commander seemed amused. He terminated the connection and returned to the bombardment. Sarah kept her ship at a safe distance and recorded everything. Every explosion. Every dying scream. Every ship that tried to flee and was cut down. She recorded for 6 hours until there was nothing left to record. 2 million souls. Gone. Not in crossfire. Not by accident. Deliberately murdered for the crime of building homes on the wrong side of an arbitrary line. Sarah transmitted her recordings on every frequency. She broadcast them to human space, to the assembly, to anyone who would listen. Then she turned her ship toward Earth and engaged her jump drive. She had to report. She had to tell them what had happened. But more importantly, she had to tell them what she had seen in that Krillic commander's face. Not regret. Not duty. Pleasure. He had enjoyed it. On Earth, the recordings reached the Defense Council within hours. They also reached Dr. Marcus Webb, a man whose title was officially Special Advisor on Xenological Relations, but whose real job was something far more classified. Marcus watched the recordings in a sealed room. He watched them 3 times, taking notes, analyzing details. When he finished, he sat in silence for long minutes. Then he picked up a phone, an actual physical phone connected to nothing but a single location, and made a call. "Mr. President," he said when the line connected, "it's time to activate protocol silence." There was a long pause on the other end. "Are you certain?" "Sir, they just murdered 2 million civilians. They enjoyed it. If we don't respond, they'll interpret it as weakness. They'll do it again. And again. Until we're extinct." Another pause. "Protocol silence was designed as a last resort, Marcus. Once we begin, there's no going back." "I know, sir. But they've made their choice. Now we have to make ours." "Very well. You have authorization." "God help us all." Marcus hung up the phone. He sat quietly for a moment, thinking about what was coming. Protocol silence wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a fleet or an army. It was something far more devastating. It was the revelation of what humanity really was. The assembly had made assumptions about humans based on limited observation. They saw the surface, the ships, the colonies, the eager traders. They saw a young species, ambitious but manageable. What they didn't see was the truth. Humanity wasn't young. Not really. Humanity was ancient, forged in fire over millions of years of evolution on a death world that tried constantly to kill them. They had survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, plagues, and countless predators. They had learned to cooperate in ways few species ever managed. They had learned to think, to plan, to wait, and most importantly, they had learned to hide their true capabilities until the moment those capabilities were needed. The assembly thought human technology was primitive. They were wrong. Human ships appeared crude because humans built them to appear crude. Human weapons seemed limited because humans showed only what they wanted others to see. Humanity had a saying, "Walk softly and carry a big stick." The assembly had mistaken the soft walking for weakness. Marcus Webb had been part of the team that designed Protocol Silence 20 years ago, back when humanity first encountered the assembly. The protocol was simple in concept but devastating in execution. If humanity was ever threatened with extinction, they would drop the disguise. All of it. Every limitation they had carefully displayed would disappear. The galaxy would see what humans really were, and it would be too late to stop what came next. Marcus began making calls. Not many, just a handful. Each call activated a different aspect of the protocol. Military intelligence, technology, diplomacy. Each sector had been preparing for this moment, hoping it would never come but ready regardless. Within hours, human space transformed. Ships that had been limited to sublight speeds suddenly demonstrated faster-than-light capabilities that put assembly technology to shame. Weapons that had seemed barely adequate revealed themselves to be merely the publicly acknowledged versions. Entire fleets that officially didn't exist uncloaked and began moving toward strategic positions. But the most important changes were the ones nobody could see. Human intelligence networks, far more extensive than anyone suspected, began feeding carefully crafted information into assembly communication channels. Human hackers trained for decades started probing alien computer systems, Human psychologists, experts in xenological behavior, began crafting messages designed to exploit specific cultural anxieties. Protocol Silence wasn't about attacking. It was about making the galaxy understand that attacking humanity had been the greatest mistake the Assembly would ever make. Captain Sarah Chen received new orders 12 hours after reporting the Meridian massacre. She read them twice, unable to believe what she was seeing. Then she gathered her crew, people she had served with for years, and told them what was coming. Everything you thought you knew about the human defense fleet, she said, was a carefully maintained fiction. Our real capabilities have been classified at the highest levels, but as of 6 hours ago, the classification was lifted. We are about to show the galaxy what we really are. Her tactical officer, a young man named Thomas Rivera, raised his hand. Captain, what exactly are we? Sarah looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. We're the species that survived everything our homeworld threw at us for 4 million years. We're the species that split the atom, walked on our moon, and built artificial intelligence while we were still confined to a single planet. We're the species that learned to hide our teeth until the moment we needed them. And now, Lieutenant, we're going to teach the galaxy why that was never something they should have forced us to reveal. The Steadfast, along with 200 other ships that officially didn't exist, began moving toward the edge of human space. They weren't going to attack, not yet. They were going to wait and watch while Protocol Silence did its work. And across the galaxy in the Assembly Council chambers, representatives from 43 species began to realize that something had gone terribly, catastrophically wrong with their containment plan. The Unseen War. The Assembly Council met an emergency session for the first time in 300 cycles. The chamber, built to inspire awe with its soaring architecture and holographic star maps, now felt oppressive. Representatives from dozens of species filled the tiered seating, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sound and light. At the center podium stood the Krillic commander, who had ordered the Meridian bombardment. His crystalline skin no longer refracted light beautifully. It looked dull, dimmed by stress chemicals his body produced when threatened. The humans have withdrawn all diplomatic contact, he reported, his translator struggling with the tremor in his voice. Their ships have disappeared from common trade routes. Intelligence suggests they are consolidating forces, but we cannot determine where or in what numbers. The Vexari representative, a floating mass of tentacles enclosed in the environmental suit, pulsed with bioluminescent concern. This is expected behavior. We threatened their expansion. They are preparing to resist. We should move forward with the full blockade. Admiral James Okoye heard these words through an intercepted communication link. He sat in a command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of Earth's moon, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time data from across the galaxy. His face remained expressionless as he listened to the aliens plan humanity's containment. They still don't understand, said the woman standing beside him. Commander Nadia Petrov was head of Human Intelligence Operations, an organization that officially didn't exist. She had silver hair despite being only 40 years old, premature aging from too many years carrying classified knowledge. They think this is about territorial dispute. James nodded slowly. Let them think that. The longer they believe we're just another expansionist species, the more time we have to position our assets. On the screens around them, data flowed in streams of light. Not military data, though there was plenty of that. This was economic data, communication intercepts, social media analysis, trade route mapping. It was information, the most powerful weapon humanity had ever developed. Status report, James said. Nadia pulled up a holographic display. Phase 1 is 60% complete. We've successfully infiltrated the primary communication networks of 18 assembly species. They don't know we're there. Everything looks normal from their perspective, but we can now monitor all official channels and most civilian ones. Phase 2, more complicated. We've identified critical infrastructure dependencies across the assembly. Power grids, food distribution, medical supply chains. Everything is interconnected in ways they don't fully realize. If we wanted to, we could cause cascading failures that would cripple their civilization without firing a single shot. James considered this. Not yet. We're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to make them understand. Understood, sir. Phase 3 is ready to begin on your order. Not yet, James repeated. First, we let them feel the silence. The silence was already taking effect. For 12,000 cycles, the assembly had functioned through constant communication. Trade negotiations, cultural exchanges, scientific collaboration. It all required trust, the belief that information shared was information honestly given. Humanity's first action under protocol silence was simple. They stopped sharing information. Human scientists stopped publishing research. Human traders stopped attending markets. Human diplomats stopped answering calls. Every human colony, every human ship, every human outpost went dark simultaneously. To the assembly, it looked like humanity was preparing for war. They were half right. Humanity was preparing, but not for the kind of war the assembly understood. Engineer Nadia Petrov had spent 15 years building the infrastructure for protocol silence. She was a genius at systems analysis, able to see patterns and connections that others missed. When she looked at the galaxy, she didn't see separate species and isolated civilizations. She saw one massive, interconnected system held together by information flow and mutual dependency. And systems could be disrupted. "Begin Phase 3, James ordered. Nadia's fingers danced across holographic controls. Across the galaxy, carefully planted code activated. Nothing dramatic happened. No explosions, no disasters, just small changes in data streams. A trade manifest slightly altered here. A navigation beacon showing incorrect coordinates there. A medical database losing a few files. A power grid showing false readings. Individually, each change was insignificant. Together, they created chaos. The Krillic Dominion discovered that their food shipments were being routed to wrong destinations. Not enough to cause starvation, just enough to cause confusion and shortages. The Vixari found that their communication networks were experiencing mysterious latency. Nothing broken, but everything slightly slower. The Thernian Collective's automated mining operations started producing less than expected, their AI systems reporting phantom errors. Nobody suspected humanity. Why would they? Humans had withdrawn. They were isolated, contained behind their borders. These problems were clearly internal issues, perhaps caused by the stress of recent events. The Assembly Council met again 3 weeks after Meridian. The atmosphere had changed. Representatives snapped at each other. Accusations flew. The Krillic blamed the Vexari for trade disruptions. The Vexari blamed the Thernian for communication problems. Ancient grudges, carefully managed for thousands of cycles, began surfacing. Admiral Okoye watched it all with careful satisfaction. "They're fracturing," he observed. "Faster than our models predicted." "Because they never truly trusted each other," Nadia explained. The assembly wasn't built on genuine cooperation. It was built on mutual fear of what might happen without it. Now that they're stressed, that fear is turning inward. How long until complete breakdown? At current rate, 6 months. But we can accelerate if needed. James shook his head. No, we're not trying to destroy the assembly. We're trying to teach them. There's a difference. Captain Sarah Chen and the Steadfast had been repositioned to the edge of assembly space. Her ship, along with the rest of the newly revealed human defense fleet, maintained a silent vigil. They didn't attack. They didn't threaten. They simply existed, a constant reminder that humanity was watching. But Sarah's real mission was something else entirely. Her ship had been equipped with technology the assembly had never seen. Sensors that could detect quantum fluctuations in subspace, communication arrays that could intercept tachyon transmissions, weapons that bent spacetime itself. All of it had existed for years. All of it had been carefully hidden. "Contact," her tactical officer called out. "Assembly patrol vessel, Vixari configuration." "They're scanning us." "Let them scan," Sarah said calmly, "but give them the show." Her crew activated systems that had never been used in public. The Steadfast's hull shimmered as quantum shielding engaged. Energy readings spiked beyond what assembly technology thought possible. Weapon ports opened, revealing armaments that shouldn't exist according to known physics. The Vixari patrol ship stopped scanning. It simply sat in space, its crew presumably staring in disbelief at their sensor readings. Then it turned and jumped away at maximum speed. "Message delivered," Sarah said with grim satisfaction. The message spread quickly. Human ships were far more advanced than anyone had suspected. Human technology wasn't primitive. It was intentionally understated. Every assumption the assembly had made was wrong. In the Assembly Council chambers, panic was replacing fear. The Vixari representative who had called for a blockade now advocated for immediate peace negotiations. The Krillic commander who had ordered the Meridian bombardment had disappeared, reportedly relieved of command and facing criminal charges from his own government. "We have to talk to them," the Alarian representative pleaded. "We have to understand what we're dealing with." But humanity remained silent. Requests for dialogue went unanswered. Trade proposals received no response. Even humanitarian offers were ignored. It was as if humanity had decided the assembly simply didn't exist anymore. Admiral Okoye knew this silence was the most powerful weapon in humanity's arsenal. Every day without communication made the assembly more desperate, more willing to accept terms they would have rejected weeks earlier. But he also knew they couldn't maintain silence forever. "How are our people holding up?" he asked Nadia. "Morale is high," she reported. "Everyone understands what we're doing and why. But there are concerns about the colonists still in contested systems. They're isolated and vulnerable. Get them out quietly. Use the stealth transports, already in progress. We'll have all human civilians behind our borders within 2 weeks." James nodded. 2 weeks. Then they could move to the final phase. But events were moving faster than planned. On the outer rim, a Thernian mining colony experienced a catastrophic system failure. Their life support collapsed, power went offline, and communication died. 3,000 colonists were dying, suffocating in the dark. The Thernian government screamed for help. Their own rescue ships were too far away. The only vessels in range were human, a merchant convoy that had been quietly extracting colonists from nearby systems. The convoy captain faced an impossible choice: help, and break the silence that was humanity's greatest weapon. Don't help and become the monsters the assembly accused them of being. She chose to help. The merchant ships diverted to the Thernian colony. They provided emergency power, restored life support, and began evacuating the most vulnerable. They worked for 18 hours straight, saving every single colonist. When it was over, the convoy captain transmitted a single message to the Thernian government. "We are not what you thought we were, but we are still human. Remember that." The incident changed everything. Across the assembly, species began questioning the narrative they had been told. If humans were the dangerous expansionists that needed to be contained, why did they risk their own safety to save Thernian civilians? If humans were the threat, why were assembly systems failing while human systems remained stable? In the intelligence center beneath Earth's moon, Admiral Okoye made a decision. "It's time," he said. "Initiate Phase 4, let's show them the truth." Nadia hesitated. "Sir, Phase 4 means revealing everything. Once we do this, there's no going back to the way things were." "There was no going back the moment they bombed Meridian," James replied quietly. "Now we finish what they started. Phase 4 wasn't about technology or military might. It was about truth." Human intelligence networks began releasing information. Not propaganda, but facts. Documented evidence of assembly corruption, species exploiting others, the real reasons behind the containment vote. Humanity hadn't been threatening the galaxy. They had been threatening the comfortable power structures that kept certain species dominant. The revelations were devastating. The Krillic Dominion had voted for containment because human trade was making their monopolies obsolete. The Vixari had supported it because human medical technology was saving lives. Their pharmaceutical companies profited from losing. Species after species was exposed, not as protectors of galactic peace, but as self-interested actors protecting their own advantage. The assembly didn't just fracture, it shattered. Within days, member species were withdrawing, forming new alliances, demanding reforms. The 12,000-cycle-old organization collapsed under the weight of its own deceptions. And through it all, humanity remained silent, watching, waiting, preparing for what came next. The new understanding, Ambassador Elena Rodriguez had never expected to be humanity's voice to the galaxy. She was a scholar, a xenologist who studied alien cultures from the comfortable distance of university lecture halls. Her specialty was cross-species communication, the subtle ways different civilizations expressed meaning through gesture, tone, and context. Now she stood in what remained of the Assembly Council chambers, facing representatives from species that had tried to exterminate her kind just 3 months earlier. The chamber was half empty. Many species had withdrawn from the assembly entirely. Those who remained looked haunted, uncertain. The grand architecture that once inspired awe now seemed foolish, a monument to arrogance. Elena carried no weapons. She wore simple clothes, not a military uniform or diplomatic regalia. She had insisted on this. "We're not here to conquer," she had told Admiral Okoye during her briefing. "We're here to explain." The Ilarian representative, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix, spoke first. Their voice resonated with harmonics of genuine sorrow. "Why did you hide? For 20 years you let us believe you were primitive. You could have shown us your true capabilities from the beginning." Elena had prepared for this question. She had prepared for all the questions. "Because we learned very early in our history that showing all your strength invites either worship or fear. We wanted neither. We wanted to be judged on our character, not our capabilities. But you deceived us," the Vexari representative protested. "You lied about your technology, your military strength, your true nature." "No," Elena said firmly. "We simply didn't volunteer information you didn't ask for. Every capability we revealed during protocol silence existed before we made first contact with the assembly. We built faster than light drives before we left our home system. We developed quantum computing while we were still exploring our own solar neighborhood. None of this was secret. You simply assumed we were primitive and never bothered to look deeper." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Elena let it stretch, understanding that sometimes truth needed space to breathe. A new voice spoke, one that surprised everyone. The Krillic had sent a representative, though their presence was controversial. The speaker was young by their species standards, their crystalline skin still clear and bright. "On behalf of my people, I offer formal apology for the Meridian massacre. The commander who ordered that attack acted against our cultural values. He has been tried and executed according to our law. But I understand this does not bring back your dead. I understand words are insufficient." Elena studied the Krillic carefully. She had spent weeks learning to read their body language, the subtle changes in light refraction that indicated emotion. This one was genuinely remorseful. That mattered. "Your apology is noted," she said, "but understand that humanity will never forget Meridian. 2 million souls, families, children. They were murdered for the crime of building homes. That memory will shape our policies for generations." "What do you want from us?" the Ilarian asked. "Reparations? Territory? The assembly is broken. We are broken. Name your terms." This was the moment Elena had been preparing for. Admiral Okoye had wanted harsh terms, conditions that would ensure humanity could never be threatened again. Dr. Marcus Webb had advocated for complete isolation, humanity withdrawing behind impenetrable borders. Even Captain Sarah Chen, who had witnessed the massacre firsthand, had suggested demands that would humble the species responsible. Elena had rejected all of it. "We want what we've always wanted," she said. "To be left alone to grow at our own pace, to trade freely with those who wish to trade with us, to explore space without artificial limits, and most importantly, to be judged as individuals, not as a category." "That's all?" the Vexari asked suspiciously. "No punishment? No revenge?" Elena smiled, though there was sadness in it. "Revenge is what got us all into this situation. You feared us, so you tried to contain us. We were hurt, so we struck back. The cycle could continue forever, each side justifying escalation based on the other's actions. Or we could choose something different." She pulled up a holographic display showing a document she had spent weeks drafting with input from xenologists, historians, and philosophers from dozens of human worlds. "We propose a new framework for interspecies relations. Not an assembly where majority votes can condemn minorities. Not a hierarchy where strong species dominate weak ones. Something genuinely new." The document detailed a confederation of independent systems, each species maintaining full sovereignty, but cooperating on shared challenges. Trade would be negotiated bilaterally. Disputes would be mediated by neutral parties selected case by case. Military alliances would be voluntary, not imposed. Most importantly, there would be a principle of non-interference. Species would be free to develop at their own pace, make their own choices, even their own mistakes, without external pressure. "This is naive," the Vexari representative objected. "Without a central authority, there will be chaos. Conflicts will arise." "Conflicts already arose," Elena pointed out, "under the Assembly's authority. At least this way, species can choose their own paths rather than having paths chosen for them." The debate continued for hours. Some representatives embraced the proposal immediately. Others raised objections, worried about losing the security the assembly had provided. Elena addressed each concern with patience and logic, never raising her voice, never threatening. She understood what they couldn't yet see. Humanity had already won, not through military victory but through demonstration. The galaxy now knew what humans were capable of, both in terms of technology and restraint. The fact that humanity could have destroyed the assembly but chose not to was more powerful than any weapon. Meanwhile, across human space, a different kind of rebuilding was underway. Captain Sarah Chen had been assigned to oversee the reconstruction of Meridian. It was painful work. The colony site was scarred, the Earth still bearing marks of orbital bombardment, but survivors were returning, determined to honor the dead by refusing to abandon their dream. Sarah stood at the edge of a massive crater that had once been the colony's main residential district. A construction team was working below, laying foundations for a memorial. Not a military monument, but something gentler, a garden with 2 million trees, one for each life lost. "It's a beautiful idea," said a voice beside her. She turned to find an unexpected visitor, a Thernian, wearing the simple clothes of a civilian. "I'm Kelvin," he said, using the human approximation of his actual name. "I was part of the colony your merchant ship saved." Sarah nodded. "I heard about that. The convoy captain took a big risk." "She saved my family," Kelvin said quietly. "My mate, my offspring, all of us would have died. When I heard about what happened here, I had to come. I wanted to help. Help how?" He gestured to the construction site below. "I'm a botanist. I study plant cultivation in hostile environments. Let me help with the memorial garden. Let me give something back." Sarah considered this. Accepting help from an alien, especially now, would be controversial. Some humans wanted nothing to do with any species from the assembly. But she thought about the convoy captain who broke silence to save lives. She thought about what Elena was trying to build. "All right," she said. "Welcome to Meridian." Over the following weeks, more aliens arrived. Not many, just a few individuals from species who felt shame about what their governments had done. An Ilarian energy specialist who helped repair damaged power grids. A Vexari medical researcher who shared techniques for treating radiation exposure. A young Krillic, the child of the executed commander who worked harder than anyone to prove that their species could be more than its worst moment. The reconstruction of Meridian became a symbol. Not of human dominance, but of possibility. The idea that different species could work together, not because a council demanded it, but because individuals chose it. Admiral James Okoye watched all of this from his command center. The displays around him now showed a galaxy in flux. Old alliances were dissolving. New partnerships were forming. The comfortable certainty of the assembly era was gone, replaced by chaos and opportunity. "Are we doing the right thing?" he asked Nadia Petrov. She considered the question carefully. "I don't know if there is a right thing, sir. We made choices based on the information we had and the values we hold. History will judge whether those choices were wise. But you think we showed restraint?" "I think," Nadia said slowly, "we showed what humanity really is. Not warriors or pacifists, not conquerors or victims. We're a species that survives by adapting, by learning, by choosing our battles carefully. We could have burned the galaxy. Instead, we taught it. That feels right to me." Dr. Marcus Webb had his own concerns. He met with Elena Rodriguez in a secure facility on Earth, where they reviewed the progress of diplomatic negotiations. "You're being too generous," he told her. "They tried to exterminate us. They don't deserve kindness." "It's not about what they deserve," Elena replied. "It's about what we want to become. We can choose to be a species defined by our worst moment, by our rage and grief, or we can choose to be defined by how we respond to those moments. I prefer the latter." "You sound like a philosopher." "I am a philosopher. That's why you asked me to do this." She pulled up a star map showing human space and the surrounding systems. "Look at this, Marcus. We have a choice now that no species has had in 12,000 cycles. We can write new rules for how civilizations interact. We can build something better than what came before. Or we can be destroyed by species who don't share our optimism." "That's always a risk," Elena admitted. "But I'd rather risk hoping than guarantee becoming what we fear." 6 months after Meridian, the last Assembly Council session was held. Not to conduct business, but to formally dissolve the organization. Representatives from 37 species attended. Many gave speeches about the Assembly's history, its achievements, its failures. Elena spoke last. She stood at the podium where countless aliens had argued, negotiated, and decided the fates of worlds. Now it was humanity's turn. The Assembly was built on a good impulse, she began. The desire for different species to coexist peacefully. That impulse wasn't wrong. But the execution was flawed. You tried to maintain peace through control, through limiting those you feared. You forgot that fear breeds resentment and resentment breeds violence. She paused, looking around the chamber. Humanity was nearly destroyed because of that mistake. But we survived. And in surviving, we learned. We learned that strength without restraint is tyranny. We learned that fear without understanding is cruelty. We learned that peace cannot be imposed, only chosen. So what comes next? The Ilarian asked. If not the Assembly, what? Something harder, Elena said. Something that requires trust instead of rules. We propose a new era of genuine cooperation, species working together because they choose to, not because they're forced to. Trade based on mutual benefit, alliances based on shared values, disputes resolved through dialogue, not decree. And if species choose conflict, the Vexari asked. Then they face the consequences, Elena said simply. But those consequences won't be decided by a central authority. They'll be decided by everyone else choosing not to cooperate with bad actors. Isolation is a powerful motivator for civilized behavior. The vote to dissolve the Assembly was unanimous. The vote to adopt humanity's proposed framework was nearly as strong, with only 3 abstentions. As representatives filed out of the chamber for the last time, Elena remained behind. She stood alone in the vast space, thinking about what had been accomplished and what remained to be done. Captain Sarah Chen found her there an hour later. You did it, Sarah said. You gave them a new path. We gave them a choice, Elena corrected. They have to choose to walk it. Do you think they will? Elena considered the question, thinking about Kelvin the Thernian botanist who helped plant memorial trees, about the Krillic youth who worked to redeem their species' honor, about the countless small acts of cooperation happening across the galaxy. I think, she said finally, some of them will, and that's enough to start with. They walked out of the chamber together, leaving it empty for the last time. Behind them, the holographic displays shut down one by one, the ancient technology powering down. The assembly era was over. Outside, a new day was beginning. Human ships were opening trade routes to species that had never dealt with them before. Scientists were sharing research that had been classified for decades. Colonies were welcoming visitors from across the galaxy. The galaxy wasn't at peace. There were still conflicts, still tensions, still species that viewed humanity with suspicion or fear. But there was also something new, something fragile but real. Hope. The possibility that different species could coexist, not through fear or force, but through genuine understanding. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, failures, moments when the old ways seemed simpler, but humanity had proven something important. They had shown that strength didn't have to mean domination. That capability didn't have to mean threat. That being different didn't have to mean being enemies. They had shown what it meant to be human. Admiral Okoye stood in his command center for the last time. Protocol silence was officially ended. The classified technology was becoming public. The hidden fleets were being revealed. Humanity was showing its full face to the galaxy. Was it worth it? Nadia asked him. He thought about Meridian, about the 2 million dead, about the blood and fear and rage that had nearly consumed them all. Then he thought about Kelvin planting trees, about Elena building bridges, about Sarah Chen choosing to record rather than fight. Ask me in 100 years, he said. Right now it's too soon to tell. But privately he thought they had made the right choice. Humanity had been pushed to the brink of extinction. They had responded with overwhelming force. But they had also chosen to stop, to teach rather than destroy, to build rather than burn. That restraint, more than any weapon, defined what humanity really was on Earth. In a small apartment overlooking the place where the ocean met the sky, an old woman watched the sunset. She had lived through First Contact, through the Expansion era, through the Meridian Massacre and the Silent War that followed. She had seen humanity at its worst and its best. She had lost family in the bombing. She had every reason to hate the aliens, to support their destruction. But she had also seen the memorial gardens growing. She had met Kelvin and others like him. She had watched her species choose mercy over vengeance. It didn't erase the pain, Nothing could. But it gave the pain meaning. She raised a glass to the sunset, to the 2 million souls lost, to the future they had died for unknowingly. "We're still here," she whispered. "And we're still trying to be better." Across the galaxy, countless beings looked up at the stars and wondered about humanity, some with fear, some with curiosity, some with hope. They didn't fully understand humans, not yet. Perhaps they never would. But they had learned one critical lesson. Humanity was not what they seemed. They were more dangerous than anyone had suspected, but also more compassionate, more capable of destruction, but also more capable of restraint. They were, in the end, the species that chose to be judged by their best selves rather than their worst impulses. And that made all the difference. The story of Earth's counterattack wasn't really about war. It was about choice. The choice to hide strength until it was needed. The choice to respond with precision rather than rage. The choice to teach rather than conquer. It was the story of a young species that grew up quickly, learned hard lessons, and emerged with wisdom that older civilizations had forgotten. The silent protocol had ended. But its lesson echoed across the stars, a reminder that true strength wasn't about the ability to destroy. It was about the wisdom to choose not to.